Okay, friends. So we are going to discuss. I was continuing with that Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of Women, and in that, there are different topics which we were discussing. That what Mary Wollstonecraft is talking about. So it is, how the virtue, the quality are associated with the sex, and then how does Milton depict woman in the Paradise Lost, and what is the characteristics of Eve? How Eve is considered to be part of Adam, and Adam is being given prominency. So then, education is one of the things which I have already talked about that. And if you just see, you just go to my previous stream, and then you will realize that I am continuing from the previous one. Now, how can women become equal to men? So here, make a case for women's right to education. And having established that women do have souls and therefore a right to acquire human virtue and stability of character, Wollstonecraft now extend her argument to include the manner in way they can do so. She proposes that instead of merely existing on the periphery of knowledge, women should turn towards the fountain of the light. Society keeps women ignorant in the name of innocency. Wollstonecraft rightly argues that the word innocence, when applied to children, is applicable, but when applied to men and women, it becomes merely a polite term for weakness. You innocence is applicable before 18 plus. But if any man and woman who are 18 plus, innocence is applicable uh, under 18 when children are considered to be minor. But after 18 plus, man and women, they fully develop their mind and they could judge easily. They can assess circumstances very well. So how can a woman be innocent after 18? She cannot be innocent. And if this innocence is being attached to her, that is simply ignorance. It means the society want you to be ignorant and foolish. It is only education which can expand their horizons and help them mature into reasonable, rational thinking human being. In this context, she returns to comment on Milton's once again, who seems to be of a different opinion, and select two passages from Paradise Lost to point out the inconsistencies in Milton's perception and depiction of women. In the first passage, Milton emphasized on the physical beauty of Eve and her unguarded. She's unguarded. Unguarded in the sense, like one way you can say it's vulnerable, and another way it is like uh, maybe she need to be guarded. Somebody should be there to guard her. Obedience, like man doesn't need any guard. Man is not asking women to safeguard him, but women are asking men to safeguard her. So this should be changed. In the first passage, Milton emphasized on the physical beauty of Eve and her unargued obedience to Adam, whom she considered her author and disposer. Just as God is Adam's law, so is Adam for Eve. It is enough, says Milton, for a woman to have this much knowledge. Then is she worthy of praise. The implication in this passage from the Paradise Lost is that woman, in this case, Eve, is denied the ability to reason and think for herself. So women are being denied ability to reason and think. She cannot reason, and then she cannot think properly. Wollstonecraft Wollstonecraft posits this is how we argue with children, because being young, their perceptive and discerning abilities are yet unformed. However, even to children, when we point out that they have to depend on their judgment only till the time you yourself attain maturity. After that, you have to think for yourself and rely only on God. If we can say this to children, then what stops us from saying this to women? Why are we preconditioning to think women all never able to think for themselves and always have to depend on men? Yet in another passage from Paradise Lost, Wollstonecraft point out the inconsistency in Milton's attitude. In this passage, he makes Adam speak of equality between him and his mate, a question God amongst unequals with society can solve. What harmony or true delight? He talks against any disparity between two sexes and says, in disparity, the one intends, the other still reminisces, cannot well suit with either, but soon proves tedious alike. True delight, he says, can come only from consorting with equals. A fellowship speaks such. The fellowship can only be attained if women are given equal opportunities. Having cleverly unearthed the nascent desire for equality between sexes, even in Milton's perception, Wollstonecraft now proceed to illustrate how this can be achieved. How can women become equal to men? The emphasis now is going to be an acquirement for those attributes that can help women become the equal for men. Okay, how can women become equal to men? The emphasis now is going to be on an acquirement of those attributes that can help women becoming the equal of man. The first and foremost important step in this direction is that of individuals' education. Expanding the idea of Wollstonecraft says that individual education should begin in childhood and should aim at developing the sense, the temper, and the understanding of the child's mind in such a way that when the body arrives at maturity, the mind too is ready to begin the important task of learning, thinking, and reasoning for itself. Making a distinction between individual education and private education, Wollstonecraft argues that the latter, man and woman, she says, ought to be educated in a great degree by the opinion and manner of the society they live in. Yet, given the present social structure, she argues that much cannot be expected from such education until such time as society is restructured without its prejudices. Even so, even individuals begin has the capability of becoming virtuous by exercising his or her reason, whatever be the circumstances. Most perfect education. In Wollstonecraft's opinion, then, the most perfect form of education for both the sexes is one that strengthens the body and form the heart by an exercising of the understanding. In other words, good education should enable man and woman to become independent. In fact, she says, all such men and women who call themselves virtuous are being false and untrue if their virtue does not result from an exercise of their own reason. Referring to Rousseau once again, Wollstonecraft pointed out that he had said the same thing but only with regard to men. She extends his argument to women too and argues them try to understand the real meaning of virtue. The outward trapping of beauty and false refinement are not true. Yet Wollstonecraft realized that the homage these fake positions bring with them is too intoxicating. But she label is degrading and call a curse and implores women to return to nature and equality. This, however, is not possible till the manner of the time are changed and then can entail a long wait, probably till such time as asking the king noble to exercise their reason, how of the here hereditary trapping of the power and aim for the real dignity of man. When this happens, women too will be required to throw off the outward trapping of the arbitrary power of beauty. If they fail to do so, then they will prove themselves to be intellectually inferior to men. The depiction of women by male writers. How male writers are depicting women. You know how the women representation is there in the male writings. The Wollstonecraft moves on next to critique those writers who have written on the subject of female education and manners and have contributed to making them seem more artificial and weak than they would otherwise have been perceived. From Rousseau to Dr. Grigori, all these writers, she says, have made women out to be almost useless members of society. Rousseau's Emily and John Grigori's A Father's Legacy to His Daughters, both these works form the butt of her criticism at this point. She points out that she has an equal quarrel with particular passages in these works, but her objection extends to the whole purpose of this book, which render women pleasing at the expense of every solid virtue. The ultimate result is a degradation of one half of the human species. Wollstonecraft find it difficult to accept Rousseau argument, and he says that once a man attains physical and mental maturity, then it is enough for his mate to rely on his understanding. The image of the graceful ivy clasping an oak would be a perfect image of strength and beauty becoming one whole. Wollstonecraft quarrels, however, stems from the fact that most often man as well as women only overgrown children. According to their bodies may have attained maturity, but their minds need not have arrived at the same time. If neither is mentally mature, it would be case of the blind leading, and blind the one can easily imagine the consequences. So like how this Rousseau and Gregory is representing women in their writings, and throughout this discussion, we are able to find out that women are not considered to be independent thinker. Okay, like she doesn't have her own intellect, she doesn't have her own decision, and primarily we clearly divide the age major and minor. So when children are minor below 18, then we find little doubt on their judgment and decision making. But how could women be, a woman who has attained 18 plus, like she's 18 year old or plus 18 year, how could she will not be having her own concern and her own independent thinking? That is a question. And that's why uh, Mary Wollstonecraft is raising questions here. What contributes to enslavement of women? What are the reasons when women are being enslaved? Wollstonecraft now began to listen and explain some of the causes that enslave women by cramping their understanding and sharpening their sense. The uppermost cause that does more mischief than other is the disregard of order. Explaining how this happened, Wollstonecraft talk about the upbringing of women which does not prepare them to approach life in orderly manner. According to her, it is this education which is to be blamed uh, here, because there is no method. The understanding and the reasoning remain limited and unfortunate due to incorrect education. Consequently, they cannot reason out things and rely on the kind of instinctive common sense. They become slave of habits, and doing so today, what they did yesterday merely because they did it yesterday, an unthinking mechanical process. Wollstonecraft expand the idea of further and point out that the little knowledge that women do acquire for the observation of the women's circumstances rather than any discipline training, which is the most must for anyone. For women, the cultivation of the understanding takes the backseat, and acquirement of the refinement and manner is favored over morals. Men, on the other hand, are from their infancy broken into method and observe and attend to things with a degree of exactness. Characters determined by education and not sex. So, I mean, how this enslavement is there, because women are not considered to be independent thinker. Even if 18 plus she's there, she's major, the society and the man especially doesn't believe that she can take independent decision. That is why most often you might have heard in the Indian households that when the decisions are taken place, women and children are not been included. For example, if the property is purchased or sold out, or a decision for the marriage, where the marriage will take place, and how this relationship is being settled. So in the matter of property, marriage, and major decisions, like if somebody is going for education, leaving the country, or major decisions, women and children are not being included in that. So it means women are not considered to be equal to men. Character determined by education and not the sex. So character, the sex doesn't play any role, whether you are decision making or anything else. Wollstonecraft now moves on to illustrate at some length the fact that person's characters is formed by education he or she received as it not determined by the sex of that person. If imperfect education is imparted to people, then irrespective of their sex, it has the same damaging effect on their character. In this context, she compares the conduct of a man in the army with that of the woman, locates a number of similarities between the two. The reason for this lies once again in the half good education and that the soldier receive and they pushed into the world. Their minds are yet unformed, and whatever they learn, they do so from observation. What socializing with people and so on. To their behavior, we find an excessive emphasis on observation and manner and custom. Their understanding is limited to this sphere, and unthinkingly, they follow the rule of the decorum. Having developed no discerning power from themselves and blindly submit to the authority. Yet this is crude form of knowledge and that never been tasted by the reason. Moreover, it is a limited awareness and should not be confused with knowledge of the human heart. Because of their efficient education, we find in these men too excessive emphasis on manners rather than morals. It goes without saying that it is imperfect education that not the sex of the person that determine their level of intelligence and understanding. With regard to women, the argument can be carried still further. Wollstonecraft referred to those men now who, while professing to be slave of their mistress, tyrannize over their sisters, wives, and daughters at the same time. If the female mind is strengthened, there will be end to blind obedience. Very ingeniously and tyrant and sensualist endeavor to keep women in the dark because then both they have power over them. Even man being a sensualist who seemingly wallows under the cruel gaze of his mistress. It is who holds sway over the woman, though she may be mistakenly thinking it is who will. See, right now situations are very different. People generally don't talk, such things in public. But even if you just go before 20 years, you will realize that, you know, these commons like, the women don't have mind and upar ka mala khali hai. Number of references you will find where the intellectual capability of women is being questioned. This is how many women have been duped by their lovers and also princes of their ministers. Wollstonecraft convincingly proved that real power lies with one who has knowledge. Rousseau's view on education for women. So, what Rousseau says. Wollstonecraft illustrates her argument by referring to Rousseau in small detail, particularly in his character Sophia in Emily. She attacks not the character of Sophia but also faulty premises of her education. In addition to Wollstonecraft is unable to digest that this same author who has talked of lefty sentiments in all his other works would lower himself to describe the physical charm of his little favorite. The emphasis in Emily is not on love, calls merely effusion of overbeing sensibility. Wollstonecraft concedes that such a love does exist, excited tenderness, and observe. She says that this tenderness is similar to that which is evoked when she sees children at play. It does not promote respect to admiration and surely does not take us to the world where sensation will give place to reason. Wollstonecraft continues to discuss Rousseau's views on women and counter and refutes most of them with indignation. The Rousseau says that obedience is the guard, lessons and should be taught to all women. Wollstonecraft brushes it aside as nonsense. She argues that even if women are considered inferior to men by nature, implies that they have virtue that must be same in equality, if not in degree. Therefore, it follows that their conduct must be founded on the same principle and should have the same aim. Yet, at the same time, it does not mean that the man and woman should forego the simple pleasure of the pursuit of the abstract thought to forget that these affections and duties are the path they should take to achieve the higher level. When it is argued that woman was created for man, an idea probably arises from the biblical story of the Adam and Eve, where Eve was created from the Adam's rib. You know, Eve was created from Adam's rib. For the creation of for the creation of Eve, Adam's ribs were used. In this story too, Wollstonecraft sees further how man has always found it convenient to exert his strength and subjugated his companions. In this case, Eve rests of the education which he thinks was created for him, and then allowing that provinces has created him to be physically superior to women and probably designated for a greater virtue. And nevertheless, Wollstonecraft argued that virtues for both the sexes should be essentially the same, because virtues can have only one eternal standard, and that is simple direction, just as there one in the God. So any direction when you're getting from God, it's just like that. Love and woman. Wollstonecraft next move on to discuss what woman should always be degraded by being made subservient to love, lust. She is careful to point out that she is not in opposition to the sentiment of the love. Rather, allowing it due importance, some maintain that it should not be overruled and superior power of the faulty faculty of the men. Youth is the reason for love, and young boys and girls give themselves up to this overwhelming possession. But says Wollstonecraft, she should take time to reflect on the more important years of the life. These years, sensation will take a backseat and reflect on truth. Truth will occupy the mind. This is where she has quarreled with Rousseau and other likes him too, who repeatedly emphasize the whole purpose of the female education should be. Then never for Wollstonecraft proceed to sketch a picture for us of such a situation. Okay, so in this way, Dr. Gregory's advice to women. No, before that, one more paragraph is there. A woman who has only been taught to please will soon find that her charm do not have the same effect on her husband's everyday life. He will see comfort herself then, if she has been given the opportunity to realize that she has either capability, she might try to cultivate those. In all probability, however, if all that she knows is limited to her knowledge of how to please a man, then she might try looking for other men to please, or love will surely give languish in despair till their health is undermined, spirits broken by discontent. And how can the a great art of pleasing such a necessary study, then if what I bring it to short-lived and ultimately leads only to confusion and despair? It can only be of use to mistress and not to chaste wives and mothers. Give such a scenario, Wollstonecraft advised that and suggested that this woman who is a wife and other concentrated on making herself morally worthy of respect. Her power to please should only help to her to polish her virtue and should not be ultimate aim. She should depend on herself and happiness rather than relying on the single person who is subjected to inferiority just as she is.